Crime fiction is one of the best-selling genres in cinema, but one thing stronger than make-believe stories is the thrill of a real-life crime being depicted on screen. It's been easy fodder for directors and screenwriters, and thanks to our advanced human race, there's never been a shortage of the rarest of rare crimes. Back in the 80s, this particular genre, exploring movies inspired by real crime, became exceedingly popular, and in this video, we'll bring you some of the finest from the decade. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Murder 1, 1986. This independent biographical crime drama is based on the infamous All-Day murders in 1972. It tells the harrowing tales of two half-brothers named Carl and Wayne, and a man named George who managed to escape from prison and go on a killing spree. They're accompanied by Carl and Wayne's teenage brother Billy, who is the witness of the murderous rampage that they conduct across their journey. During one such instance, they rob a house and kill all the inhabitants in cold blood. As the body count rises, Billy remains a reluctant observer. And finally, when they're all arrested, Billy testifies against his brothers in court and they are convicted of multiple homicides. The All-Day murders shook the entire nation in the early 1970s, as 5 men in the All-Day family were shot dead execution style and a woman named Mary was taken away only to be raped and killed a few miles away. This fact-based movie manages to deal with the obvious discrepancies that arise while telling a true story, and the grim crime drama succeeds because of some decent acting performances from the likes of Henry Thomas, James Wilder, and Stephen Shellen. There's a lot of violence, and given the accuracy of the narrative, we have to agree that Murder 1 is a forgotten and underrated thriller from the 80s.
Defendant guilty of murder in the first degree, hereby determine the penalty to be life in prison.
The Case of the Hillside Stranglers, 1989. A lot of reality and a bit of fiction make for a great combination in a crime drama, and The Case of the Hillside Stranglers does the job pretty well. The movie is based on 2 serial killers who terrorized Los Angeles, California during the late 1970s. Their victims were usually found in the hills around the city, and this got them the unique nickname, the Hillside Stranglers. The movie explores the demented life of these killer cousins, Angelo and Kenneth, and the TV drama also gives us a thorough account of the investigation on the case by Officer Bill Grogan. TV movies are not always known for their acting performances, but The Case of the Hillside Stranglers is an exception, with spirited performances from the likes of Richard Crenna, Dennis Farina, and Billy Zane. The narrative is fairly accurate, but adds a bit of drama to spice up the thrill quotient. We get a first-hand account of the killers and also the investigation process, and it gets quite intense towards the end. It's shocking to think how these notorious serial killers would have never been caught had it not been for their egotistical personality and obsession to stay in the limelight. It's a case worth reviewing even today, because sometimes the dark side of humanity is a stern reminder of just how terrible society can be.
Pull that back. Okay. That's it. Fine.
Dance with a Stranger, 1985. Ruth Ellis happens to be the last woman who was hanged in Britain after being convicted of murder, and this British film takes a closer look at her life. She had worked as a nude model and a sex worker, and later she was managing a pub in London. It's at this club that she came across a young man named David, who came from a rich family. However, his family wealth could not amount to his personal riches, and he failed to get a job, which in turn prevented Ruth from getting married to him. After she gets fired because of his drunken antics at the club, their relationship worsens when she suffers a miscarriage. Eventually, she shoots him dead after spotting him with another girl, and it's a routine conviction and punishment following the murder. The event of Ruth Ellis's death sentence was a major background for all the debates surrounding the abolition of capital punishment, and thus, this crime drama has some historic value as well. Miranda Richardson slips into the character effortlessly, and Rupert Everett is natural as ever in the role of David. A crime is a crime, no matter the circumstances, but at some point you're bound to feel sorry for Ruth and her condition that drove her to kill David. There might be tons of movies about fatal, obsessive lust, but this riveting crime drama is something that you must watch to learn more about the landmark punishment of Ruth Ellis. The Delirious Stranger, 1986. Theodore Robert Bundy is one of the most notorious serial killers in the U.S., and he is responsible for killing several young women in Seattle. Later, he moves to Utah to pursue a law degree, and young women keep disappearing around him once again. Finally, the cops close in on him after a rigorous investigation, but not before he has piled up way too many bodies. Ted Bundy has been a subject of interest for several novels and movies, but The Delirious Stranger will remain one of the finest adaptations of his dreaded crimes. The factual changes from the actual case are minimal, and Marvin Chomsky's effective direction takes the movie to new heights. The sociopathic tendencies of the serial killer are well explored in this movie, and Mark Harmon does a fabulous job as the killer. The violence in the narrative is mostly implied, but the narrative still has some chilling moments that are not for the faint-hearted. Overall, this interesting story deserves to be watched, and it might serve as a means to identify someone around you who shows signs similar to this psycho killer who killed over 23 women.
I never did nothing to Terry. Whoa!
At Close Range, 1986. This neo-noir crime drama is based on the real-life Pennsylvania crime family that operated during the 60s and 70s. The family was led by Bruce Johnston Sr., and the movie explores their criminal network and the details of their activities. From dealing in stolen goods to murders, the gang participated in just about every illegal activity, and finally the FBI and local law enforcement agencies managed to get the leader. The leader of the gang was another demented fellow who even raped his son's girlfriend, and later, this son plays a key role in his conviction. The movie boasts a star-studded cast that includes prominent actors like Sean Penn, Christopher Walken, Mary Stuart Masterson, and others. And they do not disappoint. This crime drama is gritty, dark, and the narrative is shockingly vivid. The chronology of the events is nicely handled, and everything from the direction to photography to the editing is on point. A great story based on real-life events and backed by powerful performances might just be too good a combination to pass on without watching. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, 1986. What are some of the factors that drive someone into something as twisted as serial killing? This movie looks into the factors that motivated Henry Lee Lucas to go on a killing spree. He was released from prison after his mother was murdered, and he handled his job as an exterminator with his passion for violent murders. A fellow inmate and drug dealer named Otis also assisted him in his violent journey, but things got complicated after Henry got involved with Otis's sister. How was he finally brought to justice? Watch the movie to find out. The psyche of Henry has been explored in great detail, and we get to see the factors behind his madness, from pent-up rage to sexual frustrations. There are some violent and graphic moments in the movie, but they are all crucial to the plot and cannot be avoided. Michael Rooker is impressive as Henry, and other members of the cast, like Tracy Arnold and Tom Tolles, are also up to the task. The movie has some truly disturbing moments, and it might get a bit too heavy as you navigate through the dark and twisted journey around Henry's demented soul.
What's your problem?
I want your car.
You gotta be kidding.
Small Sacrifices, 1989. This made-for-television crime drama covers the real-life case of Diane Downs, who was charged with murder and attempted murder of her 3 children. It starts off with Diane heading to a hospital with a gunshot wound in her arm. She claims that an unknown attacker tried to carjack her, and he also shot her 3 children. However, it turns out that her eldest daughter did not die, and after recovering, she becomes a key witness against her mother. Even her son is paralyzed from the gunshot injury, and later, she is sentenced to life in prison for her disgusting crimes. The movie is wonderfully captivating, but it wouldn't have been the same without a power-packed performance from Farrah Fawcett. She portrays the sociopathic monster in such a way that you will feel like shooting her through the screen, which is the true marker of her brilliant performance. The story borders on familiar territory, where a woman takes it out on her kids after being scorned by her lover, and there have been many other similar crimes over the years. Small Sacrifices might be a TV movie, but you will remember the eerie narrative and disturbing story for a very long time. Mississippi Burning, 1988. This movie might not be an exact portrayal of the real-life crime scene, but it's loosely based on a murder investigation in Mississippi involving 3 individuals. The narrative takes shape as 3 civil rights workers go missing in Jessup County, Mississippi. The FBI investigates the matter, but the local townspeople offer little help. Finally, the investigators discover that the missing men have been murdered, and what happens next as they try to get the culprits will blow your mind. The movie shines in the execution department, but it's hard to watch because the narrative will break your heart. The story is brutally honest, and the awful situations will haunt you long after you're done watching. Gene Hackman and Willem Dafoe's performances deserve a special mention, and Alan Parker's smooth, flawless direction will leave you impressed. His documentary-style approach to infuse real events with a bit of fiction leaves behind a strong sense of authenticity, and Mississippi Burning is a must-watch for all crime drama enthusiasts.
We've got a long way to go. And again, this picture, if we can put it back.
Adam, 1983. John and Reve Walsh watch as their perfect family life springs into a nightmare. Their son Adam goes missing, and after their frantic searches, they find Adam's dead body after a few days. This terrible tragedy leaves them shaken and also impacts their marriage, but the couple comes back stronger with greater goals. While the first part of the movie deals with the kidnapping and murder of Adam Walsh, the next part explores how his parents get over the impact of their child's death and attempt to pass some crucial child protection laws in the country. They even help in creating awareness groups and bring the attention on the subject of child disappearances being on the rise. There are times that you'll forget how this is only a TV movie. So captivating and intense is the narrative. Adam was a massive eye-opener for all parents with a small child, and the movie helped in raising awareness for the safekeeping of their young ones. The emotional burden that the movie brings is extreme, but even through the tragedy of Adam's death, the film does leave a positive message and raises awareness among the masses. Don't miss out on this dramatic and heartfelt story based on a real-life tragedy. A Cry for Help, the Tracy Thurman Story, 1989. How deadly can an abusive marriage be? This movie, based on a true story, is a grim reminder of the horrors that come with psychotic partners. Tracy Thurman is done with her abusive marriage to Buck, but the latter refuses to leave her alone even after she secures a restraining order against him. Finally, he stabs her multiple times, and she miraculously manages to survive. She then sues the police department for failing to offer her sufficient protection even after her complaints against her estranged husband. This particular case played a decisive role in the framing of a new law that helped in preventing similar situations, with more protection for abuse victims. Apart from the social message, this TV movie also provides a shocking insight into the horrors of domestic violence. Watching the escalation of the abuse is going to take a toll on the viewer, and wonderful performances by Nancy McKean and Dale Midkiff make the movie all the more intriguing. The movie is uncomfortably real, but something that deserves to be watched even after over 30 years. The Untouchables, 1987. The Untouchables is among the most popular and critically acclaimed crime dramas during the 80s, and what adds to its charm is the real-life inspiration from a true event. The story is premised during the Prohibition period in 1930, when a gang leader named Al Capone continues to supply liquor and takes control of business in Chicago. A Treasury agent named Elliot Ness is given the charge of stopping the gangster by finding some concrete evidence against him, and Elliot has a small team to help him out. If you're someone who isn't familiar with the story of Al Capone or the exact situation during the Prohibition period, this movie will present everything in the perfect fashion. The script is electric, and the gangster movie shines with perhaps a somewhat romanticized take on Al Capone's arrest. Veteran actors like Sean Connery, Kevin Costner, Andy Garcia, and Robert De Niro set the screen on fire with their performances. There are some epic action scenes that will keep you on the edge of your seats, and you won't mind the slight inaccuracies when it comes to the historical events. All in all, this is a timeless classic that must be watched by every movie buff out there. Patty Hearst, 1988. The story of Patricia Hearst in the 1970s was truly unique, and her transition from a normal young lady to a brainwashed tool of a revolutionary group was adapted for the screens in this movie. She was an heiress who was initially kidnapped by members of the Symbionese Liberation Army. During her time with them, she was systematically brainwashed, and finally, Patricia ended up being arrested for a series of armed robberies. But what really made her question her way of life and take up a life of crime? Paul Schrader is known for some crafty social dramas through the 80s, such as Blue Collar and Hardcore, and Patty Hearst is another stylish take on how the rotten high-class living devours an individual. The protagonist of this movie happens to be one of America's most famous hostages turned terrorist, and the twists in her life have been captured to perfection. The character development and symbolism in the narrative are top-notch, and you also have to spare a round of applause for the acting performances by Natasha Richardson, Ving Rhames, and William Forsythe. We strongly recommend this movie for the emotional and extreme turmoil in the story based on a real character.
Jump!
I Know My First Name is Steven, 1989. Steven Stainer was only 7 years old when he was kidnapped by a perverted pseudo-priest, Kenneth Parnell, and his accomplice Irving Murphy. The young boy endured hell for the next phase of his life, where he was molested for 7 years and pornographic images of him were produced. However, Steven stood up against his oppressors when they kidnapped another young boy named Timmy. By now, Steven was 14 years old, and he took Timmy to the cops and told them everything about Kenneth Parnell and Murphy's role in this crime. It would have been a happier ending if the two criminals were given a harsher punishment, but they both escaped with a 5-year and 2 years sentence respectively. While the movie focuses more on his ordeals as a child, you'll be surprised to know that Steven had a terrible family life, even after he came home. He carried the trauma of all those years in captivity, and finally, he died in a terrible accident at the age of 24. After a few years, his brother was also convicted of murdering 4 women, and it seemed like there was a creepy curse on the Stainer family. Coming back to the movie, the only issue we have with the narrative is how it tries to imply that Parnell was sentenced for kidnapping and sexual assault, when in reality, he didn't get prosecuted and was released only after 4 years. The movie promises to be a thrilling watch, but it will always be disturbing to know that all these horrors actually unfolded in real life. The Judge, 1984. The Judge is a French movie which goes by the original name Le Juge, and it is inspired by a real-life event. The case was widely talked about in France, but the movie gave out a disclaimer that it wasn't telling the story of that exact judge in question. That being said, the obvious inspiration cannot be denied, and the movie takes on the same narrative, where a judge conducts his own investigation while he's up against a notorious mafia godfather. It's the story of one courageous man who dared to raise his voice against the powerful crime ring, even though he was repeatedly warned by everyone around him. Contrary to what you would think, the movie isn't really an action-packed venture, and the narrative doesn't show the judge going all guns blazing like some super cop or a superhero. He retains his human element throughout the investigation process, and he even shows compassion and humanity towards the convicts. This spirited tale has aged like fine wine, and you can enjoy the wonderful movie and Jacques Perron's acting performances in this film even today.
I won't say anything.
Confessions of a Serial Killer, 1985. We've already covered a movie based on the serial killer Henry Lee Lucas, and Confessions of a Serial Killer takes a similar route. Here, the story begins after a man named Daniel Ray is arrested by the cops, and this is the character who is inspired by Henry Lee. He confesses to killing over 200 women, and he also shares his troubled childhood that helps the experts in understanding his demented psyche. The cops initially think him to be mentally unstable or bluffing, until everything he says starts to add up. This is a rather unsettling movie that shines despite its low budget. The acting is good, and some of the scenes look a bit too real for comfort, especially because you know that they are based on a real-life crime. You won't get too much blood and gore, but the psychological horror in the narrative is truly next level. The murderous activities of the psycho are presented as a series of flashbacks, and the fate of his victims and the nonchalance in his mannerisms will haunt you for some time to come.
His second attempt was almost successful.
The Atlanta Child Murders, 1985. This mini TV series is often viewed as a TV movie, and it tells one of the most scarring stories in American crime history, where as many as 29 African-American kids went missing and were later found dead in Atlanta. The mystery remains unsolved to this day, and no one has ever been convicted of these murders with proper evidence. Although the killer hasn't been confirmed, the killing spree is still regarded as one of the darkest moments in modern American society. The Atlanta Child Murders manages to capture something much beyond the real crime. It takes into account the politics behind the investigations, the interviews of families of the dead children, and those who investigated the case, and it will make sure that you have many questions on the efficiency of the entire investigation team. Some claim that this is a biased account of what actually transpired, but after all these years, there isn't really a way to determine the accuracy. We suggest you watch it for yourself to decide which side of the debate you will join.
You gotta be ready for that right now, right here, right now, just like that.
Manson Family Movies, 1984. Back in the late 1960s and early 1970s, a ruthless gang was active in California, and it was led by Charles Manson. They almost became like a cult, and it's believed that there were around 100 members in this gang who used drugs and were involved in multiple murders. There's a popular legend that suggests that the Manson family actually filmed themselves during their exploits, and Manson Family Movies is an attempt to recreate what they would have filmed if the stories are real. The narrative tries to track down the events that led up to the infamous Tate LaBianca murders in 1969. The film has been purposefully shot in an unsystematic fashion in order to be in line with the theme of uncertainty and mystery. It's creepy and effective, and the second half of the movie dives into the grisly murders and their details. The soundtrack is flawless and adds to the goosebumps, and fans of low-budget horror flicks and thrillers will enjoy the suspense on offer throughout the narrative. There have been quite a few movies around this concept, but this particular version is definitely worth watching.
Guilty.
Beyond Reasonable Doubt, 1980. New Zealand is known for being a picturesque vacation place, but one of the country's most controversial murder cases became a subject of great interest for the Western audience. This documentary-styled movie takes a closer look at a simple farmer named Arthur Thomas, who was accused of murdering Jeanette and Harvey Crew in their farmhouse. He tried to cooperate with the cops in order to prove his innocence, but the investigation went the other way. Eventually, he had to serve 9 years in prison, even though he was reportedly innocent. When the shocking murder took place, the cops nabbed Arthur based on circumstantial evidence, as he was their neighbor. However, a British journalist who was closely observing the case was certain of his innocence. The narrative makes you spare a thought for some outdated methods of investigation that can ruin someone's life by wrongfully accusing them. The small-town policing and political complications add some more drama to the case, and some good acting performances ensure that this film will totally be worth your time.
On your knees, down. All right, on your stomach.
Billionaire Boys Club, 1987. Scams and corrupt schemes have interested fiction for a very long time, but Billionaire Boys Club takes inspiration from a real-life case on similar lines. Joe Hunt is a ruthless investor who doesn't concern himself with the boundaries of ethics. He conceives a few schemes to make loads of money, and he soon becomes involved with a con man named Ron Levin. However, things aren't exactly rosy between the two, and trouble starts brewing for Hunt when Levin ends up dead. What will be the consequence of Joe Hunt's extreme greed and ambitions? Tales of a shady investor are always intriguing for the viewers, and Joe Hunt is a particularly infamous character in American crime history. The TV movie doesn't have to try to capture the 80s vibe like the following adaptations because it was made during the 80s. Everything looks spot on, and you will witness one of Judd Nelson's better performances. The movie might be a bit longer than usual at over 3 hours, but the exploits of Joe Hunt haven't been better explored in any other fictional adaptation. Manhunt, Search for The Night Stalker, 1989. Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, terrorized California back in 1985 through his countless killings. Two detectives from the police department are out there to track him down, but things are easier said than done. As the cat and mouse game unfold and the body count rises, you get to realize that the serial killer is smarter than your average psychopath. The movie is creepy, terrifying, and brutal all at once, and it's certainly not meant for the squeamish. This no-nonsense true crime drama wouldn't have fared so well in the theaters, and we're glad that they went for a TV movie instead. The Rapes and Murders by the determined Richard Ramirez is a story that deserves to be told as a warning, and the nail-biting narrative is the best way possible to get it over with. The movie also features some genuinely good acting, and the climactic sequence is the one to watch out for. Give this one a miss at your own risk, because this accurate portrayal of the harrowing killer is way better than what you would expect. Do let us know in the comments below if you are also drawn to true crime movies like we are. Also, don't forget to tell us about your favorite ones from the list, and make sure to check out the ones you haven't watched yet. After all, nothing quite beats a real-life threat being adapted and fictionalized in a more terrifying version. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks, everyone.
I never did nothing to Terry. Whoa! Whoa! Wait!